Welcome, everybody. This is meant to be very informal and a discussion rather than anything. Mel will be taping this for possible showing at other places, so I hope everybody's okay with that. Come on in. Just grab a chair and pull it up. I really felt like it would be wonderful to talk about this a little bit because it is a passion of mine that the military has not really been able to deal or recognize the issues or implications for all the hundreds of thousands of soldiers that we have who have had NDEs. When I was active duty, I was a military nurse for 25 years, and I, starting in Vietnam, was the beginning of my path. In the middle of the night, I was a brand new nurse in Vietnam, just out of nursing school. A young man asked me to come, and he had something to tell me. And most of his words were all about the emotions of, I've got to tell you this, it's real, please believe me, this is real. And he kept, and I said, please tell me what happened. And he went on to describe, as we know now, a pretty typical NDE. But he was not frightened, but just confused, certainly, and wanting to know what was going on. And so this is 1969. Nothing's written. There isn't anything out there except probably in the religious literature, and nothing that I knew about that I'd ever heard from my medical education. And so I sort of tucked that in the back of my brain and said, what I know is this was really emotional for him. This was really important for him. And so that I remembered. And so we're going along in the mid-70s. I'm still a military nurse. I'm trying to come to grips with some of these things. And in 1973, I was sent to the University of Texas to get my PhD. And I got a PhD in management and a double major in nursing. And during that time, my father had a heart attack. And I happened to be home when he had a heart attack, if anyone still believes in coincidence. And he was resuscitated, and my father was a man who didn't believe in any kinds of spiritual things, or, you know, I had tried to talk to him about near-death experiences before. He said, I don't want to talk about that. But what he did want to talk about after his resuscitation was his near-death experience. He said, I'm going to tell you about this once, I'm going to explain it, and I don't ever want to talk about it again. And so that's what we did. But for me, that was certainly the beginning of, okay, now we got to find out about this. I'm at the University of Texas, I got great libraries, I've got access, and I'm going to start trying to find some research on this, and it was a lot more interesting than the mathematical and decision-making behavior I had been studying for several years. And so one thing led to another, and as I learned more, as you know, and eventually Raymond Moody's book came out in the mid-70s, and so I'm like, okay, finally we have something written, something we can relate to. And then stuff just happens. People present themselves to you, and I was still really, really committed to every healthcare worker needs to understand this in order to support patients. And I intuitively knew that people were walking out of hospitals every day having had NDEs and never having a soul to talk to, because nobody knew enough about them. So in the military, it was my goal at least that military nurses and doctors would do this. And so for many years, I did teach this in the military. And in fact, they used to call me the death and dying lady because a lot of my superiors would just, one lady, I can still see her, she was a full colonel and I was probably a lieutenant at the time, or maybe a captain. And she said, "You are like a dog with a bone with this issue. Are you going to let it up?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I think it's really important." So I'm ever so grateful for those people, I guess, that listened to me, because they easily could have just dismissed me and tried to commit me to the mental institution at that time. But I did get to be a full colonel, and I did get to teach and work with near-death experiences my entire career. I, even as the chief of Frankfurt Medical Center, I had incidents with people coming in. We had incidents with ghosts in the hospital. Everybody would always come and talk to me, and you know about this stuff. And I was so sensitive to the issues of those patients that were dying. And I went so far to set up lectures because we were told to set up, it was during Desert Storm, that we were a 300-bed hospital, that on a certain weekend, we had to move from being a 300-bed hospital to a 1,000-bed hospital and get all the equipment and everything needed in the event that the ground war started. And one of the things that I did was give lectures to all the nurses. You need to know what near-death experiences are, because these people will be coming and have this, and you need to be intelligent enough to support that. And different things happened while I was there that had to do with death and dying, and because of the work I did in the military, I was really sensitive to it, and made some decisions about how things were going to be. Today, I'm equally as passionate, even more, because I know we have hundreds of thousands of GIs who are coming home with multiple tours, multiple issues with PTSD, physical trauma, and then on top of that, they're having near-death experiences, and they have nobody to talk to. The VA doesn't have a clue most of the time. They don't know even what a near-death experience is. I went to the Durham VA, and this is several years ago, and said, I'd like to know how you would differentiate a patient who came in and said, I saw God, and talks to you about an experience they had from someone who's having a psychiatric break. So how would you differentiate the NDE from someone who was having a psychiatric break? And her answer to me was, what's an NDE? So that kind of tells you where the state was of the medical profession at the time. I think we're making baby steps. I think I now have a psychiatrist in Durham who's very into the NDE and works with it, and I personally refer her. But that's not that way with everyone. And unfortunately, some of these systems now have so many problems with just taking care of people routinely. We've been trying to get into a group so that we could test. We don't know how many GIs have had near-death experiences. My own personal belief is that if the norm is between 18 and 40% or so, I think we have lots, maybe higher than 40%, because you're having multiple TBIs, and you're having lots of amputations, really traumatic healthcare stuff. So, and I recently, last year, Linda Truitt set up a talk for me at BAMC Army Hospital in San Antonio, where we have lots, and we were able to talk to some of the clinicians, mostly nurses. And one of the things that we want to work toward, and since I'm going to set Linda on this trail, I thought of it yesterday. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could bring a busload of GIs to the conference next year in San Antonio?
Yes.
And we need to find a political way through any one of the organizations where we could do that free to them. We won't charge them, and we would have our own forum and at least the beginning of a discussion about this. Because remember, these people are suffering. I work for another organization called Purple Heart Homes, and we find housing solutions for disabled vets. And I do some of the vetting of them, and I look at these background stuff, and you know, this is a 30-year-old man. He has 4 kids. He's an amputee. He's living in his uncle's basement. He, you know, hasn't gotten his benefits yet. I mean, it's a nightmare looking at them. And then, do they have an NDE on top of that? Well, nobody's going to talk to them about that. They don't even know it. My belief is, and I'd be interested in the experiencers in the room, I think that they could heal themselves of some of the issues they have if someone was there to support them, to validate their experience, to be there to give them the support and boost they need about their own experience, because they are so traumatized for so many other reasons. So for me, this is an endeavor I've been trying to work on for a long time. Ideally, we could raise enough money to do a survey of a group of military veterans, and that would make such a difference if we could go to a group and actually survey them to find out how many of them are experiencers, how their difference, if and when there were differences. We have tried, and I have put the call out to many different people. I want to do a film like this and have a military Iraqi or Afghanistan vet talk about their experience. And they are petrified. You cannot get them to talk about it. They're afraid they won't get their benefits. They're afraid their security clearances will be lost. They're afraid somebody's going to call them crazy. And they already have enough things that they're suffering from. I've sort of gone to my default wish now, is if I could get a veteran to talk about their experience and film them from the back. And it only shows how difficult it is for them to talk about this, because we have got to do something to help them. And it's not it's an easy fix. I've developed a slideshow. We have the film, the video film now from about training medical people. We have all kinds of supportive material that we could use. And my idea was to put a packet together, a professional packet, to go into these hospitals and train the trainers and help them see why this is important. Because you can bet nobody's asking, you know, how's your headache, how's your NDE? They're not asking that. They're not there. They are not even aware of it most often. And it takes people, you have to have time, you have to have some ability to sit and look into their eyes and say, I'm here, I'm interested, tell me about your experiences. And I used to do that personally and not ever mention NDEs, but say, you know, it's very difficult when you get injured. What was it like? What happened to you? You can tell me anything, I'm here to support you. And the minute you sit down and make eye contact with them, and especially if you're a nurse, then I've had very good success with people talk about it. But mostly that was in clinical situations years ago, and boy, do I wish I had kept contact information and the ability. I wish I could find this young man that I knew in Vietnam and who started me on this journey. I think that this is an exceptional time because I think it's a generation of people that are going to have multiple problems anyhow, just from their repeated exposures. It sort of reminds me of Agent Orange in some ways. Years that didn't exist, it wasn't a problem. I myself was exposed to Agent Orange, and you have to remember, even the medical field, I think about things, we never even wore gloves. There were all kinds of blood-borne diseases that were there we never even thought about when we were caring for these people. And so it is a time for us to try to rally some resources, because I don't think anybody else can fix it. If we put a professional package together, Elizabeth is working with me and Nadia McCaffrey, we're going to try to put a plan together about, we need to get a hold of somebody who has enough clout to at least get us in a door to listen to why this is important. They don't know it's important. And they don't know the ramifications of it, because you can imagine young service members, they're already frightened, and sometimes they don't remember. I have a particular person in mind who I've worked with in this other organization, and I noticed from just dealing with him, and I asked him, I said, well, have you ever heard of a near-death experience? No. When I was injured, I don't remember a thing about it. He was blown up in a Humvee and had a head injury, doesn't remember a thing about it. But the focus he has and the message he obviously got is laser sharp about what he's going to do now for not-for-profit, doing with housing. Issues with the family. Every time he talks up, he's a very distinguished young man. He stands up to talk about the housing solutions and GIs that were hurt. He starts to cry. He doesn't even realize why he's doing that, and that upsets him. And then there were some other kinds of things that we've discussed, and I said, you, I think, very much had a near-death experience associated with your injury, and I want you to read these things. Because I can relate to it, because it took me years to understand that I too had had a near-death experience. Many years when I started this, I thought, well, it's just as well that I didn't have it. I can speak from the need of the professional without having it. But then I learned sometimes you have to work backwards on diagnosing this, so to speak. I had a lot of side effects. I had an incident when I was 4. I have no memory of it. But then, what about my path? Why am I here? Why have I been working in this for 40 years? Why do I have this? Why do I have that? And then certainly I've had enough people with skills better than mine in this out-of-world field to say, oh yes, yes, you had a near-death experience and this is what happened. So it's only recently I've really trusted, even in the military, I had great intuitive strengths that I thought, and you know, the military's not big on making decisions on intuition and, and saying this, and I thought, but I did start to do that, of course, without saying why. And I started to do things because I was so passionate about the sense of transitioning. I always went to people in the hospital. It's my responsibility for the whole hospital and what's happening with all of these patients. And I would go see them, and if they had children, I would help the children say goodbye. We had some cases where a parent was dying. And you cannot believe how uncomfortable the doctors were. We had a particular very sad case. There was an entire family in a Korean restaurant and a propane tank exploded. And the mother, the father, the grandmother, 2 children were all killed instantly. 2 other children were thrown out the window by other people who were in the restaurant. So those children came to our hospital because their father was a medic in our hospital. And I can remember this like it was yesterday. I got a call and they said they were a family from Belize, so they weren't US citizens. And they said they're going to move the bodies of these parents. And I said, but these children have not had an opportunity to say goodbye to their parents. And so I called the social worker, I called the chaplain. Wouldn't you like to do something with this? No, we don't want anything to do with this. So I got my psychiatric nurse clinician, and I said, I want you to go and test this young boy, he's only 5, and see how ready he is, and we need to talk to him because we need to let him go say goodbye to his parents. So I've always believed that it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, so I did not ask anybody about this. And so we got this young boy. We had made up the parents in the morgue with blankets and things, and told him about heaven and going to heaven and what the trip would be like, where they would go, and all of those kinds of things. Then I had to talk with the staff. He's going to have nightmares. This is difficult. And then about a week later, they had a memorial, and an aunt was coming in from New York City to take, he was better and he was going to go with her. And in this memorial, and it was in quite a big room, there were hundreds of people there, and everybody kept saying, Colonel Corcoran, the aunt's looking for you. Colonel Corcoran, the aunt's looking for you. It kind of in a, oh boy, it's going to happen now, whatever, what. And I said, okay. And we found her, and I said, I understand you're looking for me. Can I do something for you? And she said, I understand you took Brandon to see his parents and said goodbye to them. And he is very worried that they haven't started their journey. So could you take him back to the morgue to make sure he sees that they're not there and they have started their journey? And of course, which I did. And she was very grateful for what had happened. And of course, the minute I heard all kinds of things. I heard some ladies in the hairdresser say, did you hear what that colonel did? Took this people to see these dead people? And, and of course, every place I had to stop and have a teachable moment about that. And of course, then the surgeon came to see me and he said, why didn't you ask me? And I said, you don't know as much as I do about this subject. and so, well, that was hard for him. And I said, I'm never going to leave a child to wonder. He will someday be glad that he had an opportunity to say goodbye. And I actually had a nursing supervisor who said that her father had a heart attack and was taken away, and she waited at the front gate for months. He died. Nobody told her. Nobody said anything. She wasn't taken to the funeral. And she said, you did the right thing. She said, it's so hurtful, and that she had experienced this as a child. So I'm really, really passionate about it and would absolutely love everybody's help with this. It's sort of, we're looking to try to make a movie like we did for the medical profession, to do one for the military. It'll probably be a different focus, not trying to educate military professionals. That'll be a little part of it, but we want to reach the GIs and soldiers and sailors, etc., so that they understand it's okay. There's help here. We IANDS can provide information. My goal or dream would be to every place there's an IANDS group that we would have a military support group. They do not want to be in a regular group. They want to be by themselves. So we might not have as many, but certainly I hope that we'll be able to start with one. If we can just get the word out that we're here, we understand you, we're not judging you, and we can help you. And it really helps that I'm retired military, because a lot of times I'll get a call and they'll say, well, this is a military person, but they only want to talk to another military person. And I have spent many an hour on the phone just doing that one by one, trying to be supportive, trying to be helpful to them. So it is a mission, one I started many, many years ago that I'm still working on. And I would be curious if any of you have any ideas, thoughts about that could be helpful.